What's up on it, podcast family? Here we are today with my friend, fresh off a huge win, Tim motherfucking Kennedy. What's up, my friend?
Nothing. I'm being forced to relax right now, so.
That's weird.
Yeah, I'm not doing anything besides things I like to do, which is weird.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were going to go shooting today, but we snatched you over this podcast.
You do. You're like, let's come do a podcast and then do yoga in the gym here. And I was like, yeah, that sounds way more fun than shooting. But all right, Aubrey, I'll come in.
Yeah, a little different. Just firing some rounds through a target or podcast and yoga. You got to keep it balanced.
Contrast, the yin and the yang.
Can't be violence all the time.
Yeah, it can. Yes, it definitely can.
So speaking of that, I want to know, I'm quite curious what little Tim Kennedy was like. I mean, before you became, badass special forces, Delta Force, Ranger, sniper, killer, UFC, top 10 middleweight fighter, killer. What was little Tim Kennedy like?
He was confused.
Yeah?
He was a middle child, second born, with a stud of a big brother. That was so. I'm not saying I had to compensate for anything, but maybe I did because he was so good at everything, but didn't try to do anything well. He just was. So I was always trying to overachieve at everything that I did, and I did everything. So I was getting speeches very early on from my dad. Son, you might want to do fewer things and try to do them better, so you're not a jack of all trades and a master of none. Later on, I become, a Green Beret and a fighter that requires you to be good at a whole bunch of different things.
Yep.
So in hindsight, it was kind of fortuitous, but
unless you were playing like volleyball and pool, that's what I did. I did so many stupid things that didn't coordinate with each other. I was like martial arts, volleyball, basketball, racquetball, tennis, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't help.
No. Well, I was doing things like handball, I was certain that at some juncture in my life I would end up in prison. So I was trying to become good at things that, skills that would translate well to penitentiary life.
Okay. That's a weird thought as a child.
I don't know.
Handball. What kind of handball are we talking? Are we talking like where you whack a ball with your bare hand?
Yeah, wall handball.
Yeah.
So you have like one cement wall, like in prison, for instance, they have lots of walls. And
you can get a ball in there.
Yeah, you can throw it over the fences or you could sneak it in a loaf of bread. So there's plenty of balls in prison, I'm sure, in every way.
Yeah, you got to watch out for most of them, but some of them are fun,
you don't
I
want
suppose.
most of them flying at you.
Especially from when you can't see them.
No.
That's no good. All right, so go on. You're working on a bunch of different stuff, trying to figure it out. That's pretty good advice from your dad because it's the lasers that end up getting paid, not the lanterns. And being able to fulfill. If you're just spreading your light evenly over a variety of different tasks, projects, skills, yeah, it's going to be okay. But if you really laser that focus, that's when you can do some damage.
Definite wisdom. And, of like the 74 different stupid things I was doing, we narrowed it down to like 40 not of the wisest things to do. Then started martial arts real early on, did it my entire childhood into,
What type?
Everything. I started with karate and went into Japanese jiu-jitsu, and then from Japanese jiu-jitsu into boxing, wrestling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
So you were pretty early on the jiu-jitsu train then,
way early, in the mid 90s,
Was that Hoist influenced? Was that at that point? Did you guys see that? Because when was UFC? Like 92 or something like that, or 90?
Yeah, the first ones were early 90s. Not like Japanese jiu-jitsu was a traditional martial arts.
Sure.
Very like my sensei walked around with an eskrima stick, and like if we lost our temper, he'd hit us in the face with it. My parents weren't motivated by the UFC at all. They were doing it to try to deter me from, again, ending up in prison. At 7 years old, when you have a kid that somebody pushes your little sister, you'd push him off the playground and he falls to the ground. You run down the playground, jump on top of him, start punching him and biting him. This is like.
So that was you. That's little Tim Kennedy.
Oh yeah, that's me.
See, we're getting this picture filled in. Yeah. We're painting this canvas.
Yeah,
we
wasn't
laid
good
the
enough
background
to
strokes.
Push the poor kid off. I have to run down the whole play gym. I was like, should I take the slide? No, I think I can make it down faster if I just run down the stairs. All right, now I'm on top of him. I'm gonna punch him for a while. Okay, now I'm gonna bite his neck. Don't push my sister again. Are we clear on this? Yeah.
That's so wild. So when you hear about somebody like that, like yourself, Do you think, in that nature versus nurture argument, do you think you just had this genetic predisposition for that kind of activity, or was this something kind of learned, maybe big brother kind of fell down the food chain, or?
I think like all things nature nurture, it was a balance of both. You know, like my dad was a narcotics officer, door kicking police officer for 30 years, working for the district attorney's office. You know, my brother now is, EOD, SWAT, narcotics officer, deputy sheriff in California. You know, the vast majority of my uncles and grandparents were both served in the military. So got a lot of genetics going on there. You know, on the flip side, the nurture side, I was raised hunting, boxing, shooting. Like, these were just things that were part of my life growing up. So it seemed a natural progression to be this way, And then, having your mom, who was, had two older brothers, be like, you always take care of the girls. You always take care of the little sister. So like this instinct reaction to, be protective was
who fucks with your little sister with two older brothers?
No, idiots. Insane. My brother's gigantic too. I'm a 210-pound dude, and I look like this midget next to my brother and my dad. They're both giants, like 6'3", 6'4", 250. And then there's little Tim.
So what happened when people tried to date your sister and would come over to the house? How was that? Walk us through that dynamic. Give us that little window into the Kennedy household.
So we both had my brother and I had awesome reputations. People would leave my sister alone. She's beautiful and adorable. She had no similarities between my brother and I, thankfully. So the ones that we weren't paying attention to were our friends. She ended up marrying my best friend.
Someone snuck in from the inside.
Yeah, literally, metaphorically. But the police officers show up and they're like, "Hey, this guy was crawling through your window." We're like, "Chad, what's up, bro? You could just knock on the front door." And they're like, and my brother in his wisdom, I'm dumb. I'm just like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, what window?" They're like, "That one." I'm like, "Well, that's my sister's window. Why would she be?"
Oh.
Got it. Now, starting early on, somebody would say something rude to my sister. She's like 14, first time going out to the movie theater by what she thinks is herself, when in fact I'm sitting in the parking lot just watching her. Like, please do something inappropriate to her. Oh, she said something not nice. I'm gonna push him through a telephone booth now.
So you had a little bit of that "I wish you would, motherfucker" kind of attitude.
Permanent,
I wish you would.
Yeah, that's to
wish
this
you
day.
Would do something.
Yeah, please do something.
So then that ended up translating. At a certain point, you said, "Look, I got to channel this into something productive. I'm going into the military."
Yep, that exactly. I had even right before that had turned amateur competitor in jiu-jitsu and kickboxing to pro, and I had 4 fights. And then 9/11 had happened right around that same time that I turned pro, and that was it. I was like, all right, I'm off. I gotta go do this. So looked for the fastest way to get with the best group of shooters I could.
Now go through. A lot of publicity's been made of the Navy SEAL training and what it takes to become that. We've all seen those little documentaries and videos. Go through the Army version of that you kind of went through to prepare you to be where you were.
Yeah. The big contrast is the motivation behind each. The Navy SEALs, it's like you have to good tan, good haircut, and you have to think you're really good. And you have to, where on the flip side, the Army, they want you to think that you're horrible at everything and that you're like an ugly oaf and a monger, and with that mentality starts the training. They start selection very early on, weeding out people that don't have the characteristics of a team player, a guy that thinks he sucks but wants to try hard at everything. That's what they look for. For me, I was right out of college athlete that was recruited by Special Forces. So they called us the 18 X-ray or Special Forces babies, which was an anomaly at the time. It hadn't existed in 25 years, where they took somebody right off the street and went to Special Forces. So we had extra phases of training where a guy that was a E8 or E7 in the Army wouldn't have to have done. I had to go do a course called SOPC, Special Operations Preparation Course. We started with 400 and some odd dudes, and we graduated 80, and that 80 got to go to Special Forces selection.
So what's that? What's that like? Because that's a pretty savage,
That's horrible.
pretty savage narrowing of the field there.
Yep. So, get up early, whatever, 4 or 5. You do your first PT, which was, usually run through creeks and rivers, getting pissed on by your cadre that were standing on bridges over you.
Literally.
Yeah, yeah. Not like, oh, you suck, verbal pissing. Like,
Like
here's my
actual
penis
urine pissing.
with urine coming out of it onto your head as you run underneath us.
Got it.
So we come back, have what they called breakfast, which was like, I don't know what it was to this day. And then would be like a class of some form, whether it was land navigation or how to take care of your feet or how to, take care of your body with nutrition that they don't give you, what kind of sleep you should have.
Hypothetically,
Yeah.
this is the nutrition you should
Had
get.
you ever had a bed and you were ever allowed to sleep in it, you should do that. But we're not going to give you either of those things, time nor bed.
Yeah.
Go run. Then after that class, would go PT again. And then after PT, would get to eat, and then would have another class. And then after that class, would PT for a third time, and then would be punished for the rest of the night for all the things that we did poorly during the day.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So at that point, are people getting kicked out, or are they just tapping out? Like, fuck this.
I think we had a 30% voluntary withdrawal, or lack of motivation, is that they called it, like where you walk up, you hit the gong and say, I'm out. Like,
So there was a literal gong.
yeah, there's a gong with with this like mallet,
Uh-huh.
that they said was a bone of a of a Vietnam guy. Anyways, I don't think it was. It might have been. It was just so thick. It was a very thick Vietnam guy.
Yeah.
As Vietnamese. Anyways, so about 30% of the guys quit. Probably 20 or 30% of the guys got injured. So they wanted to, and they did everything in their power to stay. But staph
body
infections,
just broke.
MRSA,
Yeah.
walked into a stick at night, and they have to go get their eye fixed, so they're out. And then the rest were cut. They didn't meet. They had gates and requirements. You had to run a 5 mile in such time. You had to run a 10 mile in such time. You had to be able to ruck at this rate. You had to be able to pass land nav, and if you couldn't do those things,
Yeah,
then
you're out. So that seems like pure hell. So when people talk about these fight camps, that must kind of help you to know that you've done something that was probably even more hellish than your fight camp. I mean, compare that type of experience to your fight camps now.
Man, they're such different beasts. When you're doing fight camp, I'm running up a hill. I have Andrew Craig, John Jones, Kyle Noak, Cub Swanson, and myself, and like we're racing each other up this sand dune. Like, you're not going to have a group of more elite athletes on the planet.
Yeah.
When you're in special forces, you're not going to have a group of guys, I would say, that couldn't be any dumber. Like, they would never quit. Like, they fall, break their leg, the bone sticking out of the side, and they're like, give me duct tape, I'm good. They're that strong mentally. So you have two different beasts here. You have these specimens of humans, the athletes, the runners, the John Joneses, the Kyle Noakes, the Andrew Craigs that you're always trying to compete with. And then you have these guys that are so mentally strong, they may not have the physical tools like John Jones, but they have this inner strength that you cannot break. They will just. So, fight camp and special forces training are different. I don't even know how I could compare them. Both of them are horrible. There's nothing fun about getting hit in the head by John Jones.
Sure. Doesn't sound like it.
No, there's nothing fun about putting on a 75-pound rucksack and said, hey, you have to run at this pace for an unknown distance for an unknown time. Go. There's nothing fun about that. But the end result is a new version of yourself that's better.
The harder the diamond grindstone, the sharper the sword.
Yep.
That's it. It's either going to break the steel because it's too much, which happens a lot. It sounded like 70% of the people in the camp. And fuck, who knows with fighters? I mean, what's that winnowing like?
I couldn't even imagine. By the time you get a guy at Jackson's,
yeah,
how many phases from the gym or high school wrestling or their first few amateur fights, their first couple of pro fights, at jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or a smoker, like when you finally have those 200-300 athletes that are at Jackson's or the 400-500 athletes that are in the UFC, that's whittled down from tens of thousands.
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
don't
it's, who knows, the base of that pyramid is so big, and then all the way to get to the top. Well, let's go. I want to draw another comparison here too. So, people make a lot of war type analogies for MMA, but
Yeah.
you've actually been in war, so what's the difference in preparing for true combat versus, the sport of MMA, which feels a lot like combat to everybody, and definitely brings up some of that energy, but it's a much, much different game.
I think the approach in preparation is similar. When you're trying to be good at shooting a gun, you have all these small skills that you're trying to develop. Like I'm working on my trigger squeeze, I'm working on my sight picture, I'm working on my breathing patterns, I'm working on my breath control. Like I have all these things that I'm trying to develop. They're perishable skills that I'm trying to get better. As a fighter, the exact same. Like I'm working on my jab, I'm working on my cross, I'm working on my head movement, I'm working on my footwork. So you, from a micro approach, try to take each of these skills and develop them individually. And then the end result is you have a better execution of this group of skills. The difference is, obviously, war is horrible, war is disgusting, war is evil, and only way to prepare for that is with the closest thing that you can get to it, and that's what Special Forces training is. It's just
Getting pissed on, not
Yeah.
sleeping,
Yeah.
horrible,
yeah.
evil.
How do you create war in a training setting?
Sure.
Like how do you take that piece of metal and try to forge it into something pretty? You
Yeah.
heat it and you hit it.
Yeah.
It's the exact same in fighting. Like you're preparing somebody to be a fighter. You have to heat it and you have to hit it. So the act of preparation is the same. The end result are two totally different creations. Thankfully, we don't have to have a lot of war fighters, especially now as the wars are winding down. So we have to prepare fewer of them, and there's less damage done to them because it's permanent. It's hard to reforge something once it's been made.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. But talk about a little bit about the mental side of it. I mean, if you're on the eve of a mission, or right about to go out versus the eve of a fight, I've certainly noticed that it seems like the very best, the way that they walk out into the ring seems like the way that you would want to be in battle. And what I mean by that is the champions seem just like they're alive in the present moment, like just kind of aware of everything, tapped in, very, very kind of in tune. But how is that kind of the same way that you want to be in war, or are you trying to be a little bit more, keep it lighter, or what's the difference in the mental side of things?
I think you want a healthy anxiousness, this nervousness that makes everything acute, real, and sharp. Colors are brighter, whites are whiter, blacks are blacker. And with that is such a clarity, such a focus that, everything else on the peripheral, on the outside, it's there and you acknowledge that it's there, but you're focused on what you're there to do. When you're walking out of the cage, that's how I feel. I'm anxious. I'm not nervous. I'm excited. I want to get in there and I want to hurt something. When I'm sitting on the side of a helicopter, I have my SR-25 on my lap.
That's some kind of gun, I presume.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's the same. I'm sitting there. I'm waiting to see a muzzle flash at my helicopter. Like I'm anxious. I'm ready. But then the moment that bird goes to land, the dust gets kicked up, everything's brown, it's total brown out, and then you start seeing muzzle flashes towards your helicopter. They don't know where you're at exactly, and then you start hearing rounds just snap by your head. It goes from nervous to scary, and that's where it's different. When I'm in the cage, I'm anxious walking up, but the moment that you're in there, I see the referee, and I see my dude standing across from me wearing 4-ounce padded gloves. Then it's a sport. But up to there, it's real similar in, I think, the physiological response that your body's having.
How do you? I mean, you're saying it's scary, and I think it's, I think it's something that a lot of the greats say is that they do feel fear, and that's important to feel fear. But I think a lot of the people who pretend that they don't, like, oh, I'm just never scared. I think that's probably bullshit. But how do you work with that when it comes through you? Because those bullets flying by your head. How do you use that in a positive way rather than just getting completely shut down by that overwhelming emotion?
Fear is good. Fear does things to the human body, especially for combat. That is good. Adrenaline is a wonderful drug that makes you do fantastic things that you probably couldn't have done without it. And anybody that says that they aren't scared when a bullet snaps by their head is an idiot or a liar.
Right.
I don't want to be deployed with idiots, so usually we're able to find those guys and get rid of them before they make it into combat on a special forces team, which leaves us with a liar.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few of those, where the guy's like, I'm not scared of anything. But that's the minority. Because of the team dynamics of a Special Forces ODA, which is a 12-man detachment, I'm there at my friend's birth of his daughter or his son. I'm at their baptism. When they need a witness for the marriage, the whole team is there.
Sure.
You got 11 of them.
Yeah, that bond is something pretty sacred that probably most of us can't even imagine.
Yeah. So you say, how do you use that fear productively? Well, one, your body does it automatically. And then two, you look over at the dude standing next to you. Nothing else matters. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much easy from there. You see him start running towards gunfire, and you're going to run with him.
Mm-hmm.
He gets his arm blown off and slides down a hill. Like, you're going down that hill to get him. There's not even a second of thought. It's just how it is, because that's like the dude standing next to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you've been decorated with a few different honors for the different things you do. You up to tell one or two of those stories here? Is there any of that you're up to share as far as some of your combat experience?
Some of them I'm not allowed to, but
Mm-hmm.
a couple of them I can. One in Afghanistan. This is a good example of how tight a team is. We were escorting a foreign special forces unit for the Joint Coalition. So you had like 8 or 9 different special forces units that were operating in Afghanistan. The Aussies, the British, the Canadians.
Who's your favorite to work with?
The Aussies and the Canadians. I know Canadians. You're like, what? Are you sure? There's not a lot of them, and they don't get to do much. Normally, it's not like Canada's always like warmongering, like, let's go invade insert name of country here, like we do. So when they have an opportunity, they're like, oh wait, we're part of the Joint Coalition and we're going to Afghanistan. This is our chance to get. So like those dudes are just hungry to, they're just like us.
They're ready to mix it up.
Yeah, when you get to that elite special forces guy, it's the same dude regardless of what country you're in, what language you're speaking, what color your hair is, what color your eye is, what color your skin is. It's the same dude.
Yeah.
And so you get this Canadian who's just like all of your bros, and he's been a really angry pit bull on a leash inside of a small cage that hasn't been fed in a really long time, and now he just got let out. That's Canadians. So we're taking this group in to put them into a forward operating base, and we had this huge supply train of things that were going to sustain them in this FOB, FOB, forward operating base. So they had their food trucks, the water trucks, the ammo trucks. There's like 50 trucks, and then their own armored trucks. So it was not a small caravan at all. So it was not easy to miss, and it was a very easy target for the Taliban. So we knew we were going to get hit in certain valleys, and the worst one was this Chakajoy Pass, and we're like, all right, we know we're going to have to deal with stuff here. Let's just get ready for it. So we were doing the best as we could, getting guys high. We had CAS, close air support, and helicopters. We had triple layer of air support from AC-130s to fast movers to helicopters, all standing on station, kind of waiting for us to get in there. Mm-hmm. So we're like, this is eerily quiet as we're rolling in. Of course, that's how it all starts. Then the truck in front of me blows up and lands up on top of my hood. And then the RPG skips off my hood and goes up into the mountain next to us.
Whoa.
And those things start getting real. Then
So how much of a close call is that? I mean, the RPG skips off your hood.
It's not a great weapon. The bad part about them is that there's thousands and thousands of them. So like the odds of eventually finally getting, and they suck, the shooters, the guys, the terrorists that are using them aren't very talented. So,
but if it hits with the point, you blow up, right?
Yeah.
So it basically had to hit at this kind of obtuse angle
Mhm.
where the point didn't hit.
Yep, that's
That
exactly.
sounds like a fucking close call to me.
Yeah, I mean maybe 5 degrees more, and it would have been less
Okay.
than ideal. It's also a direction. It's a directional weapon,
Right.
so it might not have jacked us up inside the cab, but it definitely would have messed up our engine, and then we would have been stuck, and that would have not been ideal. So, truck is up on our hood. RPG skips off the top, goes off, and then all the machine gun fire starts going. You know, they had like probably 8 or 9 pre-positioned, bunkered in machine guns. So they start kicking our butt. In comes the best air support that we could. The angle of the valley prevented the cast unless we're going to be damaging ourselves. So we're trying to back up, and then we have all these trucks behind us, like jingle trucks, and they start getting hit from the rear. So we're kind of pinned in, and we get our truck up, and my buddy Mike gets on. He's on the 50 cal, and he's just raging, going ballistic. You know, it's like you can just totally see Sylvester Stallone just like ah, and the driver, which is this Irish Special Forces guy, was like, "Oh, they're still alive." I'm like, "Who?" You know, like, we're supposed to shoot them. And he's like, no, the truck that was on our hood. And we look down, and like of the 6 dudes that were in there, a couple of them were like kind of pinned underneath it. And he just jumps out of the truck and starts running down there. And I was like, this is not what we're supposed to do, you know.
Right.
But I'm not going to let him run down by myself. I'm a coward. I was scared. I didn't want to go,
Right.
but I'm not going to let him go. So I was
Sure.
like, God damn it! So I follow him, and I have my long gun, my sniper gun, and which is not the greatest tool when you're trying to drag bodies. And these dudes, these terrorists, these the Taliban guys start coming out of the woodwork in this valley, in this little shrub tree line. You know, I'm like trying to wing around, shoot with my long gun. Mike in the 50 cal is like shooting past us, which is a crazy feeling 50 cals go over your head and next to you.
Yeah.
And just start racking into these dudes coming out of the woodwork, as we're trying to drag these 2 bodies that were like kind of still alive out from underneath this Humvee. And that was the start of a 3-day gun battle.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So that was not a good 3 days. Like on the scale of good days, that's like way down there at like the 1-2 level.
So you guys basically created some kind of defensive formations around your equipment and were just for 3 days back and forth.
Yeah.
Lulls of action and lulls of quiet, or was it just fairly continuous, or how did that?
It was fairly continuous. You know, we got ammo resupply dropped into us on 3 different occasions. Like, so I like shot all the bullets I had on me, and
And you're still shooting the long gun.
I was shooting everything I could get my hands on.
Right.
You know, I was saving the long gun for kind of things that we had to shoot that we knew needed to be taken care of. You know, you see PCAM shooting down at you.
What's PCAM?
So an AK or a 3-weight bullet is a 7.62 by 5.1. A PKM is like an AK but a lot bigger and heavier.
Uh-huh.
And it's the machine gun version of it.
Okay.
So it's a 7.62 by 5.4. So it's a little bit bigger bullet, and or a little bit more.
Smaller than a 50 cal, but bigger than an AK-47.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, an AK-47 is 7.62 by 3.9. So the length of it is shorter, whereas the PKM is a heavier, faster.
So you
bullet.
got to identify that, put it in the scope,
Yeah.
eliminate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd save my long rifle for that, and then, you know, shooting everything else we could at everything else that moved or looked like it moved.
How many do you think were attacking you at that point?
So the final like AAR, which is the after action review of that tick, which is troops in contact, was they said there's around 400 or 500 guys.
Uh-huh.
You know, we had one Special Forces U.S. Special Forces ODA, so about 14 dudes, and then we had the foreign Special Forces unit, which was about 20 guys, and then we had our air support. So we probably killed 300 of them with the air support, and the rest was us on the ground.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, at that point, do you even feel the fatigue, or is it just the adrenaline? I mean, is there a point where adrenaline just fucking wears off? at that?
Yeah, it's weird. So like you'll have, you know, the crests and valleys of your responses to fear and to adrenaline. So like you're going, everything's crazy and you're screaming and, you know, like dirt's flying, blood's flying, you know, and then it's just like everything stops. And that might last for a second or might last for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
You don't know why it stops or just stopped. Maybe they went to pray. Who knows? And in that moment, like, you crash. And I mean crash, like, you have no control over, like, you just feel like you're going to fall over and go to sleep.
Uh-huh.
And but then something happens, or you make a choice to stay busy. That was my approach. That was my technique. Was I always just found something to do so I could stay kind of in it, and then when the next thing started, I was already there. There was no big bounce back for me. There's no valley that I had to crawl out of to get back into the fight. I was kind of just staying in the fight at different degrees of it.
Mm-hmm. Now, going through that experience as a special forces guy, I mean, you don't hear about as many of the special forces guy with this, kind of post-traumatic stress. What's the difference in kind of and I don't know, maybe that is more common than I recognize, but that sounds like something, if I was going to say, what is a good recipe for post-traumatic stress, it would be going through an event like that. But you don't see that as much, at least in my encounters with special forces guy. What's the kind of difference in mentality that allows you to be able to process that thing that is so impossible and inconceivable for most of us?
The recipe for post-traumatic stress, is pretty clear. It's a guy that doesn't have a lot of physical coping mechanisms or support social coping mechanisms. A special forces guy has the best group and setup to deal with any stress that there is. He has his team, he has his family, he has the physicality to be able to, like, physiologically deal with what's going on. So you have a National Guardsman that enlisted to be a truck driver, and he's driving and his truck gets blown up and he has to get out and fight. He never thought he was going to fight. He thought he was going to drive a truck. He never went through selection. He never went to infantry school. He never went to airborne school. He never went to Halo school. He never went to sniper school. He's just a truck driver that works 2 weeks out of the year, every a weekend a month.
Yep.
That guy isn't prepared for what he's going to see. A special forces guy, we're triple volunteers. We volunteered to go in, we volunteered to be special forces, and then we volunteered to go to combat. These are three things that we always have to volunteer for. So we're going in with our eyes wide open. Once we get there, we are the guys that are going to have the wrong mentality, the wrong personality to not be able to deal with this. They get cut. They get eliminated. That's why special forces selection is a year long. You have 28 days of weeding out the initial group, and then they have a year of training where they pick out the guys that don't have the characteristics that they need. And then you get to your team, and they get rid of the rest. Your team will burn you so fast if you're not the right guy, if you're not the contributing member to the team. And then once you're on the team and you're part of it and you're hooked in, there's nothing that could happen to you that your team wouldn't be there for.
Right. Yeah, that support system sounds huge.
Yep.
Preparation and support seem like a huge thing. And hopefully with, as big a problem as post-traumatic stress is, hopefully some of these, different treatments and support systems and groups can kind of come out. I know they're having a bit of luck with flotation tanks and different things that allow your mind to just kind of relax a little bit, because it's like it's almost gets you in this permanent state of being
anxiety.
riled up. Yeah. How long did it take you to recover from that, just from a physical standpoint, though? I mean, 3 days up in gunfire,
So we finally made it to the firing base. Once we got there, I fell asleep on a treadmill for like 14 hours. And the Taliban that we had been fighting had kind of like been harassing us during the whole entire movement from that point back to the base. Once we got back to the base, we were repoising ourselves to respond to them. So, I wake up from the treadmill, my neck's kind of sore, and I was like, all right, back to work.
Why'd you choose a treadmill?
It was flat, and it has rubber, and it looked clean. So it was, like the guys that get on the treadmill are SF guys.
Yeah.
So I knew whose sweat that was. So if I was going to be laying in somebody's sweat, that's, the best sweat to be laying in, I think.
I only lay in special forces sweat, bro.
Yeah, sweet sweat.
Oh man, that's fucking wild. All right, so let's talk about a recent, MMA story. So you just got in there. A lot of shit talking back and forth, and you got in there with Michael Bisping and had some fun.
That was awesome.
And that seems like a lot more fun than that 3 days pinned in Valley.
Oh, it's so much more fun.
So tell us about that. Tell us about kind of leading up through that and kind of the back and forth, and then getting to get in there and settle all things with your fists.
Michael Bisping. A few years ago, he fought one of my very good friends, George Rivera. And in that fight,
I remember that there was a lot of shit talking for that. George Rivera he did a great job.
Yeah, great job talking crap, promoting that fight. They get in there. Michael Bisping, it's a good fight. It's going back and forth, and George is on his knee up against the cage, has both hands down on the ground, and Michael Bisping just launches this illegal knee right into the side of George's head. Boom. George goes out, and from a legal knee on the ground. And he wakes up like 20 seconds later. The ref puts Michael into his corner, and the ref stands George up. He's like, all right, you have 5 minutes to recover. We're like, what? This is insanity. You're like, now, an illegal knee, Michael Bisping would get disqualified, and then he'd probably be fined and suspended. But this fight wasn't happening with any real athletic commission, so we're just like, we'll just see how this goes. Are you going to be good to fight? George Rivera is a hard, awesome dude from Boston. Typical Boston strong, maybe too tough for his own good. He's like, yeah, bro, I'll fight. Let's do this. So he goes back out there, and Michael Bisping subsequently beats him after he wakes up from this illegal knee. After the fight, Michael Bisping goes and spits on my other friend, which was in George's corner. Not like a pah, right into my friend Matt Finney's face. And I was like, so not only did he illegally knee one of my friends, then he spit on my other friend.
See, he didn't get to hear the story about what happened to the people who fuck with your little sister. So
yeah.
He missed that
Somebody
story.
should have told him.
See, people, listen. Don't do that kind of shit.
My friends and my family are off limits. You can pour a drink on me. You can spit in my face. I don't care. But you mess with those, it's a bad, bad deal. So I was like, from that point forward, I'm like, I don't like that guy. I'm never going to like that guy. We fast forward for a few years. He keeps doing dirty things in the cage. I still don't like him. And
you must have smiled a little bit at UFC 100 when Dan Henderson.
Oh yeah, yeah. When Dan Henderson did the flying squirrel monkey fist stomp into his face, I was screaming with joy. But it's not as satisfying. If you really want to,
you got to do it yourself.
You got to do it yourself,
of course.
So, the UFC by Strikeforce. And, the very first fight in the UFC from Strikeforce, I'm like, I want to fight Michael Bisping. Please, 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 please. And everybody calls out Michael Bisping because he's a loudmouth and he's a douche. Yeah. So I was just this little tiny voice surrounded by a lot of other louder voices that was pleading and begging for a chance to kill the count. And, Michael would respond occasionally I don't know who Tim Kennedy is. So then how about that douchebag gets a win before he even talks to me. So then I get my win. I'm like, all right, I got a win. He was like, I've been on 5 main events. How about he proves that he deserves to be in the cage with me? He's not even top 10. So I get a main event, and I had to knock out Rafael Natal. I'm like, all right, I'm 2-0 in the UFC. I just want to, knock out of the night on a UFC main event card. How about now, Michael Bisping? He's like, no, I don't want to. Well, then I go to re-sign my contract with the UFC. And I don't go in to argue more money. I go into Dana's office, and I was like, all right, I want to fight Michael Bisping. And, with that, anyway, so I line out, some things I want to do pretty much revolving around being violent. And Michael Bisping was on the top of that list. And so it's like, wait, you don't want, this or that? It's like, no, I want to fight Michael Bisping. Done. Signed right there. Joe Silva calls him. Cool, you're going to fight. So leading up to the fight, he just stayed true to what he's always done. Just been a horrible person. And so he's a horrible person all the way up to walking into the cage.
No, we'll talk about the weigh-ins, because what was he saying at that point? He was jawing at you. He speaks in...
Okay, am I allowed to say anything on the radio?
Yeah, fucking all right. Anything.
So he, let's see. He was going to rape my bloody cunt. That came out.
Oh.
That was cool.
Ooh.
I was like, I didn't even know I had one. Or that it was that time of the month, and then...
I'm going to rape your bloody cunt.
That's exactly how he said it. He just gave me a flashback. That was beautiful. It was just this. I don't know if he rehearsed it because it was fluid. The obscenities that were coming
Maybe
out
that's
of...
just one of his special gifts.
Yeah, a God-given gift. Because it was gorgeous. Picasso does his thing, and
Uh-huh.
Michael Bisping does his, which
So
is
I like it. I'm gonna rape you bloody cunt. What else did he say?
Oh, so he had this dwarf. He had this midget, this small person that was like part of his entourage. And that guy was also talented in the trash talking. But I didn't know how to respond. So I had this midget heckling me the entire week in Canada. Like, I come out of the elevator, and he's like walking to weigh-ins. He's like, you're going to need a bloody pillow, a fucking bloody pillow, because you're going to wake up looking at the lights on Wednesday night. And I was like, oh, like, Michael Bisping's going to knock me out, and I'm going to be unconscious looking at the lights, and I'll be sleeping because I got it. I understand. Like, you're making fun of me right now. And like, we're on weigh-ins, like, I'm hearing Michael Bisping just like, like, I'm going to kill you. You're going to wish you never were here. Like, nobody's going to know your name. But then simultaneously, there's this little person right to my left, like, saying equally clever things that also weren't very nice. So I was really torn about where my attention should be, like this dude in front of me that I'm gonna fight tomorrow night, or this midget heckling me right now. And I was like, I don't know what to do.
How wild!
It was strange and cool.
Yeah,
it was a great experience.
Yeah. You just kind of smiled. But,
Yeah,
you were just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, I've been
That's
pissed
funny.
on as I was running underneath a bridge.
Yeah, that's
like,
not gonna really bother you.
Yeah,
You're gonna need more than a dwarf.
Yeah, I'm like low crawling through this muddy thing we call a gig pit, which is like a big pool that's filled with scum and dead animals. And like, your hand slides through something and it comes up and you're like, I think that was a raccoon that's been dead for a few months. All right, I'm gonna keep crawling, and like, oh, that's warm. Oh, that's pee. Okay, moving. Yeah, and I'm gonna keep crawling. So like, Michael Bisping's talking smack.
Yeah. Rape your bloody cunt is,
Yeah.
not that aggressive at that point.
Yeah, I'm pretty disappointed. And that's why in a few interviews, it's like, honestly, I'm just disappointed. I was hoping for more, and this is not what it was. I was hoping for some pushing, maybe like he'd try to poke me. We had actually my cornerman Nick Palmisano. He had an umbrella and like a face mask that was ready for weigh-ins, just in case things got real and spit started flying. We're gonna break out that bloody umbrella and protect ourselves from Michael Bisping's spit.
Always prepared.
We are ready to go.
Always fucking prepared. So then all that's behind you, and you get to fucking step in with the man.
Yeah,
That's the beauty. That's the beauty. People talk so much shit in so many other sports, and then you have to like play basketball again.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
like,
do you want? I'm gonna back up and throw a 3-pointer.
yeah.
How do you like that, bro?
Exactly.
No.
It never quite scratches the itch,
No.
like getting in there. Even in boxing, I noticed that, like all this shit talking, and then people will be like super frustrated. They'll be grabbing each other and just like holding.
They can't do anything.
because you can't do as much. But
No.
UFC, you get to really unleash.
Yeah, I can pick him up and slam him.
Yeah.
I can lay on top of him, and like just absolutely break every bit of who he is.
And that's pretty much what you did.
Yeah, that is what I did. Like, it's been 2 weeks, and my hands are just now recovering from hitting that poor fella. They've been sore for 2 weeks, and a few times, I will give a little nod to recognize that Michael Bisping is a tough dude.
Yeah.
Because I beat his ass.
Yeah.
I hit him hard a lot of times.
A lot of times.
And and even at the 4th minute of the 5th round, he's still trying to get up with me on top of him. I think that's commendable. So Michael Bisping, I nod and I salute you for taking a good ass whooping.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So as far as for what you wanted to execute, I think, for us looking in, we knew that once you grabbed a hold of him, it was going to be real tough for him. But I was, I think myself and a lot of people were impressed with your stand-up. He's pretty well known as a top stand-up guy, and you were fucking clipping him.
Yeah, I outlanded him on our feet with head power strikes 2-1.
Yeah.
So, everybody was talking about the volume of what he's going to put out, his footwork. So my response to that was just big, stupid clubbing fists, flying through the air like an idiot. Yeah. So, and I just wouldn't stop.
And you just did it.
Yeah. Why my hands are still sore. There it is right there. Yeah, I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to take it into the 3rd or 4th round and then knock him out. And, I almost got him in the 4th round. I'd been laying on top of him for 3 rounds, and then, throw an overhand right on the chin. He's on, like, Queer Street with his legs, and I couldn't finish him. So that was kind of disappointing.
Good on him, though.
Yeah, good, whatever.
Well, he certainly didn't rape your bloody cunt.
No, he did not.
That was a false promise.
Yes.
Chalk that up to the did not happen category for Michael Bisping. So what's next, my friend?
I want Vitor Belfort to get clean. No steroids.
I would like a unicorn pet.
Yeah.
We can all wish for something.
Yes. So this
that
is,
might happen. Vitor might get clean, maybe, and I
It's-
might
it
get
is
a
just-
unicorn. But
yeah, it's
we'll see.
about as realistic as you getting a unicorn.
So what's the other plan then?
Okay. Outside of the option of me getting to fight Vitor Belfort in a contender fight, Lyoto Machida, Chris Weidman loser would look good. Mark Munoz, Musasi winner would look good. So
You're basically saying one fight to the belt.
yeah,
Yeah. So
You know,
whatever's going to be that pathway.
I'm 3-0 in the UFC. Hodger Gracie, Rafael Natal, Michael Bisping, these are not little names. And I think fighting a title contendership fight at this point kind of makes sense.
That makes sense to me too. What do you think about the champ?
Chris Weidman's a beast.
Yeah.
He is he's everything a champion should be. He's a hard worker. He's a blue collar trainer. He's surrounded by good people that want to see him succeed. There's nobody with a purer heart than Longo and Sarah. So I remember that dude like 3 years ago where I went up there and rolled with him, and we rolled for like an hour and a half, and no submission happened. No real position was accomplished. It was just like scramble after scramble. And I've been a black belt for 10 years, and I was like, this is fortuitous. This guy, I think he had one fight in the UFC at the time. And I'm like, this guy's going to be for real. And, he hits like a freight train. He has all the tools to be the champ that the UFC deserves.
If you had to say, with all due respect to Chris, what is that intangible or tangible thing that you are going to apply that could lead to you getting your hand raised in that fight?
He's such a hard worker and such a diligent athlete. I don't think he pays attention to some of the small things. He's still a young MMA. Even though he's a champ, he's only been in MMA a few years. Yeah, he's been a wrestler his entire life, and he's been an athlete his entire life. But what the things that Anderson Silva could do to these super tough guys, just with technique and the right execution in the right opportunity, gave for highlight wins. I think those moments exist in Chris. Unfortunately, Lyoto Machida is the guy to capitalize on those moments.
Sure.
And I see him when Chris fights. I'm like, there it was, or that's when
That's that little window of opportunity.
it's so small and it comes and goes in a second.
Yeah.
But guys like Anderson, guys like Lyoto, and I think guys like myself can take advantage of those.
Makes sense. Well, let's take it out of the realm of fighting and talk to people. You're someone who's very rarely reached the pinnacle of two different fields, become, somewhat of a master in two distinctly unique, although there's some crossover in preparation and mental side of things, but two distinctly different skill sets. What advice would you give to people, still figuring out, trying to find their level of mastery, still hindered by their own internal processes that are keeping them from getting there?
Taking occasionally a step back, trying to get a big picture as to where you're going and how the best way to get there. That's one approach. The other one is always moving forward, where you never stop, always moving your feet, always find something to do, continuous progression. I think both of them, I have kind of a little bit of both. I like training smart and I like training hard. There's guys that only train smart and only train hard. So if I were to say one thing was have the heart to never quit and always move forward, but have the brains to take a step back and look at the best and most efficient way to achieve what you're trying to do. So never quit, always go forward, work hard, be the first one there, the last one to leave, but sometimes take a step back and make sure you're doing it all right.
Yeah, because you got to point that discipline and force in the right direction for it to apply.
Absolutely.
I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, one other question similarly. If you had a message to give to all 8 billion people in the world, just one message about anything you wanted, you could just get their attention where they could look up for a moment, what would that be?
individual responsibility. People don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything, you know, like they watch the movie Blackfish and they think SeaWorld's bad, but they've never done anything to save a single, you know, marine wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they talk bad about me being a hunter, but they have no idea the horrific things that happen to their food by the time it gets to their table.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they look for a handout from the government, but don't do anything to contribute back to the community. You know, like just limitless examples of individual responsibility. Take ownership of who you are as a person and how to become better and contribute back to society and to your own group.
One of the old great lessons from, you know, I just spent some time in Peru, and one of the old great lessons from that goes back many thousands of years to the Chavin pre-Andean civilization is the principle of reciprocity. And that was one thing that really came through. I mean, the earth gave us life, whatever you want to call it, the universe, great spirit, there's been a million names for it. God is one of them. They gave us a chance at existence. And the principle of reciprocity would say that it's our turn to also give back to that process,
Mm-hmm.
you know, whatever that may be. And everybody who's done something positive in your life, you know, the opportunity to give back is there. And if you don't take the responsibility to do that, you're going to feel a little bit empty inside, because that is one of the sacred, you know, old laws, you know, the principle of reciprocity. And it makes a lot of sense to me what you're saying.
Yep.
Indeed.
Exists.
It exists.
Karma's real.
It's real. It's real.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So this being an On It podcast, I know I certainly appreciated your process in reviewing our products thoroughly and stuff. So how is that stuff been a benefit to you, man?
Yeah, you probably so, you know, you're all listening. Aubrey, when he first came in, gave me some products, and I was like, "Oh, cool, a lot of great stuff. Let me give it a try." And you know, like I journal every workout, everything I'm taking, every calorie, you know, things that go into my body, and everything that comes out of my body. It's all journaled. And Aubrey gets these emails like, "Hey, you know, I'm doing these neurological warm-ups right now, and you're like, this is what I think, this is what I don't think, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm not feeling." You know, and Aubrey's like, who is this dude? You know, like. Why is he emailing me? You know, like, this is irritating. You know, and then the first real opportunity for me to get an existential look at these products was I was on Alpha Brain fighting Rafael Natal, and my coaches screamed our code word for a specific punch. And I do that specific punch the moment that they screamed it, and I have this perfect clarity of that moment of me hearing each of my coaches say the exact freaking thing and me doing what they told me to do, and I get knocked out of the night. Big bonus from Dana, and I'm like, sky high, main event, great KO. And I'd never had that clarity in the ring before. And one of the very few things that changed that entire fight camp were On It products. So I was like, all right, I'm sold.
You're in.
And you know, even in the journaling, had seen progression and development and a whole bunch of things, you know, from Alpha Brain and Shroom Tech and my overall performance and metabolic conditioning. So I was like, all right, I'm on board. You know, I am on the bandwagon.
Hell
you know,
yeah.
so
Hell yeah. Well, we're fucking thrilled to have you, man. It's been a real pleasure to get to know you and to do all this. Oh, should we talk about the bike, Orlando?
Yeah, we can talk about the bike.
we're talking motorcycles.
Yeah.
It's
We
beautiful.
should talk about the bike. So we have a custom built bike.
It's gorgeous.
By Dar Holdsworth of Brass Balls Cycles, and we're figuring out a way. I don't think we've exactly figured out the exact details, but at the end of the day, we're going to get a way to raise money for the troops and get the bike in the hands of either a veteran or an active duty member. So we're going to sort that out, and we're going to, you know, get you out there talking about it and make sure that it does both of those things.
Yeah. Every single soldier that's listening right now, this bike is a dream come true. It is absolutely beautiful. You know, I've been riding since I was 16 when you're allowed to ride in California at 16. I was like, hand-drawn art on the gas tank. Everything is this flowing beauty art. It's gorgeous motorcycle. You know,
Yeah.
like I had motorcycle envy, and I don't get it often.
Cool. Well, we're going to figure out how to get that out there. Keep a lookout for that. That'll be in the next week or two. We'll have this whole program going, and hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Get
excited.
principle of reciprocity. You know,
Yeah.
you guys do so much for us. So this is just a little small token that we can give back and get a badass bike and a little
Not
bit of
so
money.
small.
Yeah.
Nice.
Not to the person who gets
Yeah.
it, for sure. Cool, my friend. Well, pleasure. Thanks for stopping by, and glad you're here in Austin. Good
Love
to see a
this
bunch
place.
of you.
Yep.
Yeah, let's do some yoga.
Yeah.
Take it easy on it, people. Much love.